Welcome. Settle yourself into a comfortable position. Let your body grow heavy and allow your breath to slow. Tonight, we are leaving behind the familiar rhythms of the modern world. The hum of traffic, the glow of screens, the constant rush. All of it will fade as we drift gently back into another age. We are sailing to a time when the world was wider, darker, and filled with mystery. A time when people trusted the pull of the stars, the whisper of waves, and the strength of wooden ships to carry them to distant shores. The Norse, explorers, farmers, warriors, and sailors, ventured across treacherous seas, chasing stories of new lands and opportunities beyond the horizon. But this will not be a tale of grand battles or thunderous storms. Instead, it is a quiet journey, a slow and steady exploration of what it felt like to live in that distant world, day after day. You will feel the spray of salt water on your face. You will hear the rhythmic creak of the ship's timbers. You will taste the dry bread and briny fish that sustain them. We will drift through 4 chapters tonight, beginning with life aboard a Viking longship, then tracing the story of explorers like Erik the Red and his son, Leif Erikson. We will follow the mysteries of Norse navigation, and finally, we will step inside the warmth of a chief's longhouse, where tales and feasts contrasted sharply with the hardships at sea. So, close your eyes if you like, breathe deeply, and imagine yourself in a place far removed from the present. The year is somewhere in the late 9th century. The sea is vast, the stars unpolluted by city lights, and the only sounds are the creak of ropes and the sigh of the waves. Imagine waking from a shallow sleep, not in a soft bed, but on rough, splintered planks, your body stiff and sore from another restless night. The air is cold, sharp with salt, and every breath tastes faintly of brine. The smell of damp wool and tar lingers around you, mixed with the earthy scent of wet ropes coiled nearby. The ship sways gently, though the motion is constant, always a reminder that beneath you is nothing but water, stretching farther than your eyes can see. You sit up slowly, pulling your cloak tight. Around you, your shipmates are stirring as well, faces wary but disciplined. There are no cabins here, no private spaces. The Viking longship is an open vessel built for speed and for striking suddenly along distant shores. Privacy is a luxury unknown. You share every breath of air, every shift of weight, every sound with dozens of other men. If there is wind, the sail may help carry you forward, but the Norse trusted muscle over the mercy of breezes. The oars are long and heavy, worn smooth where countless hands have gripped them. Your palms are raw, calloused, and blistered from days of rowing. Yet, the rhythm must not falter. The helmsman calls softly, and the oars dip into the water in unison. Pull, push, breathe, pull, push, breathe. The creak of wood and splash of water become a kind of music, repetitive and lulling. Meals are meager. Someone passes around dried fish, its salty smell strong, its texture tough and leathery. A bit of hard bread follows, so hard that it must be softened in a little ale before it can be eaten. There is no feast here, only enough to keep you strong enough to row. A small cup of watered ale washes it down, offering warmth, but also the faint, sour tempts of a drink that has traveled long and far. The sea is calm today, but fear is never far. The horizon is an unbroken line, and any shift in the sky could mean a storm. The longship, so graceful and sleek in design, is also fragile. Its low sides make it swift for raiding and landing on shallow shores, but those same features leave it vulnerable. When waves rise, they sweep over the deck easily, and every man aboard knows stories of ships swallowed whole by sudden tempests. You pull your cloak tighter and keep rowing, knowing that a storm is never more than a day away. Seasickness is a constant companion for many, even for seasoned sailors. The rocking of the ship can turn the stomach sour, especially when paired with the oily taste of dried fish. The smell of sickness mixes with salt, air, tar, and wool. There is little comfort here, only endurance. At night, there are no bunks, no hammocks. You curl up on the same damp planks, using your cloak as a blanket. The ship is narrow, and every man sleeps shoulder to shoulder, knees drawn to his chest for warmth. The wool beneath you is always damp, never fully drying in the sea air. A small shield may be placed over you, like a makeshift roof, offering a little shelter from rain or spray, but it is never enough. The stars above are clear, sharp, and cold, a glittering reminder of just how far from home you are. The days blur together in a rhythm of rowing, eating, bailing water, and watching the sky. There is little conversation. The roar of the sea and the wind make speech unnecessary. Instead, there is the occasional hum of a song, a low chant passed down from generations of sailors, its steady beat matching the pull of the oars. It is not a song of joy, but of endurance. The rhythm is comforting in its repetition, a reminder that you are part of something greater than yourself. The journey, the crew, the ship. Occasionally, the ship pulls close to shore, not to rest, but to repair or to hunt for supplies. A stream offers fresh water. A small fire on the beach provides a moment of warmth. The men stretch stiff limbs, mend torn clothing, and scrape barnacles from the hull. Yet even on land, the sense of weariness lingers. You know, this is only a brief pause. Soon, the ship will be launched again, and the oars will dip back into the cold, dark water. The Norse longship is an elegant piece of engineering, but life aboard it is a study in endurance. The crew works in shifts, bailing water constantly, adjusting sails, rowing for hours without pause. At sea, there is no separation between work and rest. Every moment is part of survival. And yet, for these sailors, this was life. The hardships were simply the rhythm of existence, the price paid for adventure, trade, and conquest. You imagine the slow passing of days at sea, the sun rising and falling over an endless horizon. The ship rocking in a constant lullaby, the calloused hands gripping the oars. The discomfort is ever present, but it becomes normal. Over time, even misery feels like home. And so, the ship continues forward. The oars dip and rise in perfect rhythm, cutting through the waves with practiced grace. The wind shifts gently, filling the sail, and for a moment, the crew rests their aching arms. The ship glides silently now, skimming over dark waters, the sound of waves against the hull like a whisper. This was the world of the Norse sailor, unrelenting, dangerous, and strangely serene. A place where each day was defined by the sea's moods, and survival depended on strength, patience, and luck. Let us now drift forward in time, following the lives of two men whose names have become legend. Men who, like these nameless sailors, braved the sea, but whose ambitions carried them far beyond the horizon. Imagine yourself standing on the rocky shores of western Norway in the late 10th century. The air is sharp, scented with pine forests and salt from the North Sea. The world feels vast and wild. The coastline jagged with fjords, the villages scattered and humble. Here lived a man whose fiery temper and striking red hair earned him the name Erik the Red. Erik was not born into legend. He was the son of a man named Thorvald, and like many Norsemen of his time, his life was shaped by hardship, law, and exile. His father had been forced to leave Norway after a killing, and so the family settled in Iceland. This was not uncommon in the Viking Age. Violence, though part of life, was subject to strict laws. And a man guilty of murder could be declared an outlaw, cast out from his community. In these northern lands, exile was not just a punishment, it was a death sentence for those unprepared to survive on their own. In Iceland, Erik grew to manhood, but his own temper led him down a similar path. After a dispute turned violent, he too was outlawed. The details of these feuds have faded over centuries, softened by time, but the pattern is clear. Exile shaped Erik's destiny. Like his father before him, he had to leave everything behind. But where others might have resigned themselves to life on the edge, Erik looked outward, across the dark waters, and imagined something more. Sometime around the year 982, Erik gathered his family, a few loyal followers, and supplies. They loaded their ships and set sail westward. He had heard whispers of a land beyond Iceland, a place sighted by a man named Gunnbjörn Olfsson decades earlier. The tales were vague, just rumors of distant islands glimpsed through fog. Yet for Erik, the unknown offered a strange kind of hope. The voyage was perilous. Imagine being aboard Erik's ship, the North Atlantic stretching endlessly in all directions, the sky gray and low. The wind lashes the sail, and waves crash, no maps to follow. There is no clear path, no maps to follow. The sailors rely on memory, on instinct, and on the sun when it breaks through the clouds. For days, they sail through icy waters, scanning the horizon for signs of land. At last, a rugged coastline appears. Steep cliffs rise from the sea, and glaciers loom in the distance. Erik has reached Greenland. The name he would later give this forbidding land was carefully chosen: Grunland, or Greenland. Some say it was a clever piece of marketing designed to encourage settlers to join him. In truth, Greenland was harsh, but Erik carved out a home there, establishing farms along the southern fjords where the climate was more forgiving. For several years, Erik worked tirelessly to build a settlement He raised livestock, planted crops, and traded with Iceland. Slowly, others arrived, drawn by the promise of land. The Norse communities of Greenland remained small, but they endured, clinging to survival on the edge of the known world. Erik himself became a figure of legend, a man of fierce ambition, resilience, and leadership. But his story is only the beginning. His son, Leif Erikson, would carry their legacy even farther. Leif grew up surrounded by tales of his father's daring voyages. He learned seamanship and survival from an early age, and, like many Norsemen, he was curious about what lay beyond the horizon. By the year 1000, Leif had grown into a capable leader, calm where his father had been fiery. He was a man of quiet confidence, one who preferred careful planning to reckless risk. Leif's most famous journey began not from Greenland, but from stories. Travelers spoke of a land far to the west, beyond even Greenland's icy shores. Some called it a place of forests and meadows, rich in game and resources. One man in particular, Bjotni, claimed to have glimpsed it after being blown off course. Intrigued, Leif decided to find this mysterious land for himself. He set sail with a small crew, likely no more than 35 men. Picture their ship cutting through icy waters, the men wrapped in heavy cloaks, their breath visible in the cold air. The longship is sturdy, but small compared to the vastness of the ocean. Days stretch into weeks. The sun is low in the sky, and ice drifts silently past the hull. They pass through a land they call Helioland, the land of flat stones, thought to be modern-day Baffin Island. The shore is rocky, barren, and inhospitable. They sail onward, reaching Markland, the land of forests, possibly Labrador, with its dense woodlands offering valuable timber. Still, they push forward, seeking something more. Finally, they arrive in a place unlike any they have seen before. The coastline is gentler, the climate milder. Grapes grow wild, or so the sagas claim, inspiring Leif to name it Wineland. Scholars believe this land was somewhere in coastal Newfoundland, but the exact location remains a mystery. For a time, Leif and his crew settled there. They built shelters, gathered resources, and explored the surrounding area. The land was rich with game, rivers teeming with fish, and forests filled with timber. For men accustomed to the icy barrenness of Greenland, Vinland must have felt like a paradise. But paradise was fragile. The sagas tell of encounters with the indigenous peoples, whom the Norse called Skrælings. These meetings were tense, sometimes hostile. Though details are sparse, it is clear the Norse were not welcome. The settlements were temporary, lasting only a few years at most. Eventually, Leif and his men returned to Greenland, bringing tales of this mysterious land across the ocean. Leif Erikson is remembered today as the first known European to set foot in North America, nearly 5 centuries before Columbus. Yet, in his time, his achievement was just one part of a larger Norse story. A story of exploration, resilience, and an endless curiosity about what lay beyond the horizon. Back in Greenland, Erik the Red never saw Vinland for himself. By then, age, and illness kept him ashore. But his legacy endured through his son's daring journey. Together, their lives reflect the Viking spirit, a willingness to face hardship, to leave everything familiar, and to carve out a home in the most unlikely of places. Picture their world for a moment. A small settlement huddled against the wind in Greenland's fjords, snow clinging to the slopes, the sea frozen along the shore. Within the longhouses, firelight flickers against carved timbers. Outside, the stars blaze bright, untouched by city lights. And far across the Atlantic, a land they once touched remains silent, unknown to the wider world for centuries. Their story reminds us of the thin thread that connects legend and history, and of how the Norse, through courage and necessity, mapped the edges of the known world. From their lives and voyages, let us now drift into something more mysterious. For these explorers, sailing across such vast waters without modern tools seems almost impossible. Yet, they did it over and over again. How did they find their way across the open sea? What secrets of navigation did they possess, and what mysteries still surround their journeys? Close your eyes for a moment and picture the open ocean. The water stretches endlessly, a dark mirror of the sky above. There are no landmarks, no coastal cliffs or islands to guide you. The wind whispers softly, the waves rise and fall, and the horizon is a seamless circle. For a modern sailor, navigating these waters might seem impossible without compasses, charts, or satellites. Yet over 1,000 years ago, Norse sailors crossed these same seas with astonishing accuracy. How did they do it? The answer is not entirely known, and that mystery is part of the magic of Viking exploration. What remains are clues scattered through sagas, archaeological finds, and centuries of tradition. One of the simplest tools they relied upon was memory, the accumulated wisdom of generations. Knowledge of the sea was passed down through families and crews, not written in books, but stored in stories and songs. Experienced sailors knew the behavior of birds, the colors of the sky, and the way currents tugged at a ship's hull. They recognized the smell of approaching land, a faint, earthy scent carried on the wind. They watched drifting seaweed, listened to the sound of waves breaking in the distance, and studied the flight paths of seabirds. Each sign was a thread, and together they wove a map of the sea in their minds. The Norse also navigated by the sun and stars. At night, they looked for Polaris, the North Star, which marked true north. On clear days, they could judge their direction by the position of the sun, noting its path as it arced across the sky. In summer, when nights were short or nearly absent in northern waters, they learned to rely on subtle changes in daylight, wind patterns, and sea swells. But the North Atlantic is not often kind. Fog rolls in thick and low, obscuring the sun and stars. Storm clouds can blot out the sky for days. How then did they continue to sail with confidence, even across open waters, far from land? This is where one of history's most intriguing mysteries comes in: the sunstones. The sagas, particularly those written centuries after the voyages, speak of a magical stone that allowed sailors to find the sun, even when the sky was overcast. At first, historians dismiss this as legend, a poetic flourish. Yet, in the 20th century, archaeologists and scientists began to wonder if these sunstones were real. The theory is this: Vikings may have used a crystal, possibly Iceland spar, a clear form of calcite, to detect the polarization of sunlight. Even when the sun is hidden behind clouds, polarized light creates patterns in the sky. Patterns invisible to the naked eye, but detectable through this crystal. By rotating the stone and observing how light refracts within it, sailors could estimate the sun's position with surprising accuracy. Researchers conducted experiments and found that Iceland's bar could indeed be used this way, making it possible to navigate even in dense fog. Imagine a sailor holding a smooth, cool crystal to the sky, turning it slowly in his hands as the ship rocks beneath him. Through its lens, faint patterns reveal themselves, and from those patterns, he can guess the hidden sun's location. It seems like magic, but it is simply a deep understanding of nature, refined over centuries. Beyond crystals, there were other tools. Fragments of a sun compass have been discovered in Greenland, a small, carved wooden disc with markings that may have been used to track the sun's shadow. Paired with knowledge of latitude and time of day, it could help sailors maintain a steady course. Yet even with these tools, much of their success came down to skill, patience, and an intimate relationship with the sea. Think of what this would feel like. Weeks at sea, with no sight of land, trusting only the waves, the wind, and subtle clues in the sky. The Norse knew how to read the ocean as others read a book. The shape and rhythm of swells could tell them which way the wind had blown far over the horizon. The calls of seabirds hinted at land beyond sight. A sudden change in watercolor signaled shallower depths. All of this was information if you knew how to listen. To us, their voyages may seem reckless, setting out into the unknown with nothing but wooden ships and intuition. But to them, the sea was a familiar road. Its dangers were real, but so was its rhythm. The creak of the mast, the sigh of the ropes, the steady beat of the oars, all became part of a language the sailors understood. And yet, mystery remains. Archaeologists still debate exactly how far the Vikings sailed, how precise their tools were, and how much was skill versus sheer courage. The sagas are filled with poetic exaggeration, blending history and myth, leaving us unsure where fact ends and legend begins. Perhaps that uncertainty is fitting. The Norse lived in a world where the line between the natural and the mystical was thin. A stone that could reveal the sun would not have felt out of place in their culture, where the sea itself was alive, and gods and giants seemed to walk just beyond the horizon. Picture a Norse navigator standing at the prow of a ship, the wind cold against his face, the sun hidden behind heavy clouds. In his hand, a small crystal catches what little light there is. He turns it, studies it, nods to himself. Without hesitation, he signals the helmsman, and the ship adjusts its course. The men keep rowing, unaware of the subtle calculations taking place. To them, he is simply a skilled sailor. To us, he is a reminder that ancient people possessed knowledge we are still rediscovering today. As the longship sails on, its course set by these ancient methods, let us follow it back toward land. Picture the moment of arrival after months at sea, the sight of a familiar shoreline, the smell of pine forests and smoke curling upward from distant farms. The crew is exhausted, clothes stiff with salt, faces lined from wind and sun. They pull their vessel ashore and step onto solid ground at last. But not every Norseman lived his life on the restless sea. For many, voyages were only a season of hardship, followed by a return to warmth and community. To truly understand their world, we must step inside a longhouse, a place where the flicker of torchlight, the smell of roasting meat, and the sound of storytelling offered a stark contrast to life on a cold, wet ship. After months at sea with nothing but salt spray, hard bread, and cold winds, imagine the feeling of stepping onto solid ground. The longship is pulled onto a pebbled shore, and the weary crew unloads their gear, their boots sinking slightly into soft earth. Ahead, a path winds through low grass, leading to a great wooden hall. Smoke drifts upward through an opening in the roof, and the sound of voices carries faintly on the wind. You draw closer, and the smell reaches you first. Roasted meat, rich and savory, mingled with the earthy scent of wood smoke and pine resin. This is a longhouse, the heart of Norse community life. Long, narrow, and built from sturdy timbers. Its thick walls are insulated with turf or sod, helping to keep out the bitter northern chill. Step inside, and your senses are met with warmth. The heat of the central hearth wraps around you like a blanket. Shadows dance along the carved beams, lit by flickering torches and the soft glow of embers. The air is thick with the comforting aroma of cooking food, damp wool, and the faint sweetness of mead. Inside, the space feels both communal and grand. Benches line the walls, covered with animal furs to soften the wooden seats. At one end of the hall, the high seat of the chieftain commands attention, flanked by carved posts decorated with symbols of protection and power. Shields hang on the walls, and above you, rafters are blackened by years of smoke. This is not just a home. It is a gathering place, a seat of authority, and a stage for stories that will echo for generations. The feast begins slowly. Trenchers, simple wooden platters, are placed before guests, and steaming dishes are carried in. Roasted lamb, smoked fish, and thick cuts of pork are served alongside hearty bread and cheese. Bowls of butter and salt are passed from hand to hand, and mugs are filled with ale or mead. Its golden sweetness, a luxury after weeks of watered drink at sea. The hall hums with conversation, the low rumble of voices blending with the crackle of the fire. For the sailors, used 2 days of hunger and damp discomfort, this is a rare kind of paradise. They eat until they are full, their bodies finally at ease. But the feast is not only about food. It is a symbol of wealth and hospitality. A generous chieftain earns loyalty through such displays, offering plenty to his warriors and guests. Alliances are forged here, disputes settled, marriages arranged. The feast is a political tool as much as a celebration. As the meal continues, a skald, a poet, and storyteller steps forward. The room quiets, and his voice rises, calm but commanding. He begins to recite sagas, long, intricate tales of gods, heroes, and ancient battles. His words carry rhythm, almost like music, and the flickering firelight seems to sway with his voice. These stories are more than entertainment. They are memory, history, and myth woven together, preserving the deeds of ancestors and inspiring future generations. Around you, the hall is alive with small details. Children dart between benches, dogs curl up near the fire, and the occasional burst of laughter cuts through the steady murmur of voices. Outside, the night is cold and silent, but inside, the Longhouse is a world unto itself, warm, bright, and alive with the sounds of community. The contrast is striking. Just days ago, you lay on wet planks under a star-filled sky, shivering and hungry, the wind howling in your ears. Now, you sit surrounded by warmth and abundance, your belly full, the taste of mead lingering sweetly on your tongue. This duality was the heart of Norse life. Hardship and danger met with equal measures of hospitality and kinship. The sea took much, but the land gave back, and the Longhouse was a sanctuary from the storms of both weather and war. Even in its comfort, though, this hall reminds you of the wider world. Weapons hang on the walls, a reminder that peace is never permanent. The men gathered here are sailors and warriors, farmers and craftsmen, their lives shaped by constant movement between home and voyage, peace and conflict, safety and danger. The feast is a pause, a brief interlude in lives often spent at the edge of survival. As the night wears on, the energy in the hall softens. The torches burn low, casting long shadows. Guests lean back, their voices hushed, their faces lit by the dying glow of the fire. Outside, snow begins to fall softly, blanketing the world in silence. Inside, warmth lingers, and the rhythm of the feast slows to stillness. You can almost hear it, the quiet breathing of those asleep, the faint pop of embers, the sigh of the wind against the walls. In this moment, the Viking world feels far away from its fierce reputation. Here, in the heart of winter, surrounded by family and kin, the Norse found solace. From the deck of a creaking ship to the mysteries of open sea navigation to this glowing hall of stories and laughter, the Viking world was full of contrasts. It was a life of hardship, but also of resilience, ingenuity, and deep connection to both sea and land. And now, as the last mug is drained and the final log added to the fire, let us step back from this ancient world. Let us leave behind the scent of wood smoke, the taste of salt and mead, and the whispers of stories that carried across centuries. We will drift back into the quiet of our own time, bringing with us only the echo of waves and the steady creak of a ship's mast. And now, our time among the Norse draws gently to an end. The waves that once rocked their longships grow still, and the firelight of their long houses fades softly in your mind's eye. You have walked their world, a place where wooden ships cut across icy seas, where sailors trusted stars and whispers of wind to find distant lands, and where warmth and kinship glowed brightly against the darkness of northern nights. Life then was not easy. It was a life of endurance and courage, where every journey was uncertain and every harvest hard-earned. Yet, in that struggle, there was beauty. The steady rhythm of the oars, the sharp, clean scent of pine forests and salt air, the soft murmur of voices in a hall lit by torchlight. These were the constants that shaped their days, binding communities together in a world both harsh and wondrous. As you listen now, safe and warm, the contrast is clear. The floor beneath you is solid, unmoving. The air is calm. The sea is far away, its dangers only a memory from a time long past. You carry the echoes of their lives with you, but you are here in a moment of stillness, where the only waves are the soft rise and fall of your own breath. Take a slow breath in and out. Imagine the longship at anchor, gently rocking on dark waters beneath a sky full of stars. The sails are furled, the oars rest in their locks, and the crew sleeps soundly, their cloaks pulled tight against the cool night air. The sea whispers softly against the hull, a lullaby older than memory. The Norsemen stories have become legend, but tonight they are only shadows and whispers. The sagas are quiet now, their voices soft. The fire in the Longhouse burns low, and smoke drifts lazily toward the rafters. Outside, snow falls silently, blanketing the earth in peace. The wind has stilled, the waves have calmed, and time itself seems to pause. You are safe. The journey is over. The world of storms and distant horizons is far behind you. All that remains is warmth, stillness, and rest. Close your eyes, if you haven't already, and let yourself drift. The past has become a soft blur, like mist over a northern sea. The sails are down, the oars are silent. All is calm, all is quiet, and now you can sleep. Welcome, dear listener, to another gentle journey into the quieter corners of history. Settle in. Perhaps you're lying in bed, the lights are low, and the world outside your window has grown still. Take a deep breath and let your shoulders soften. Tonight, we'll drift back to the rolling decks of the 18th century, to a time when wooden sailing ships crossed oceans, their masts creaking like ancient trees and sails sighing with every gust of wind. You may imagine yourself standing at the edge of a quiet harbor at dusk. The tide moves, lapping at the weathered timbers of the pier. And before you rises a towering naval ship, its rigging an intricate lattice against the fading sky. The smell of salt and tar fills the air, and the soft clinking of chains and distant voices carries over the water. This was a world of great adventure, yes, but also one of exhaustion, hunger, and hardship, where daily survival was a constant act of endurance. In this long and calming exploration, we'll first sink deeply into the rhythms of life aboard ship for an ordinary sailor. From there, we'll trace the path of Admiral Horatio Nelson and his fateful day at Trafalgar, then wander through the mysterious world of shipwrecks and the treasures they left behind. And finally, step carefully into the contrasting lives of officers whose world, above decks, was an entirely different universe. But for now, let's imagine what it was truly like to be at sea in the 1700s. Let's go below decks, where the air is thick and dim, and where hundreds of men lived in cramped wooden quarters for months at a time. Close your eyes and picture yourself waking to the sound of the ocean's endless sigh. You awaken in darkness. The first sensation is the sway beneath you, the slow rhythmic rocking of the ship as it rides the long rolling swells of the open ocean. The hammock that cradles you creaks softly, its rough rope stretched between two beams overhead. The air is damp, heavy with the scent of salt water, mildew, and unwashed bodies. It is so close here, so crowded, that each breath feels warmed by the men sleeping just inches away. Above your head, faint beams of lantern light flicker, casting shadows that sway in rhythm with the movement of the ship. The low murmur of snoring men surrounds you, punctuated now and then by the distant scrape of boots on the deck above. You shift carefully, mindful not to disturb the hammock of the man beside you. For space is precious here, and your world is only as wide as your shoulders. Rats skitter in the darkness, their claws scratching softly against the planks. They are bold. These ship rats, accustomed to men and their food. Somewhere nearby, one clambers over a barrel, its faint squeak joining the chorus of creaking timbers and the groan of the hull as the sea presses against it. The smell of the ship is layered, salt and tar, sweat and stale beer, damp rope, and the faint sourness of spoiled provisions. A whistle shrills through the gloom, high-pitched and sharp, and the stillness of sleep shatters. This is the boatswain's call sound every sailor knows well. You swing your legs carefully from the hammock and drop to the floor, your bare feet meeting rough, splintered wood. There is no space to stretch or stand tall. The beams overhead are low, and you duck instinctively as you pull on your clothes, still stiff with salt from yesterday's labor. The morning meal is a meager affair, taken quickly and without ceremony. On a worn wooden plate sits a slab of salted pork, its edges tough and pale. Tiny maggots wriggle faintly on its surface, but no one remarks on this. The meat has been salted for months, and such additions are not uncommon. Beside it is a hard biscuit or hardtack, so dry and solid it must be struck against the table to crack it. Many men soak theirs in a tin cup of beer or water, both long stale, but still safer than fresh water that has stood too long in casks. You eat because you must, not because you wish to. The air smells faintly sour, like damp grain, and nearby a sailor coughs, his breath ragged from weeks of this diet. Scurvy is a constant threat, gnawing at the health of every man aboard, though few truly understand its cause. Teeth loosen, wounds refuse to heal, and exhaustion clings to everyone like a second skin. Once breakfast is taken, work begins. The day's labor is relentless, for a sailing ship is an enormous, living machine of wood and rope that demands constant attention. You climb into the rigging, barefoot for better grip, and your hands close around rough hemp lines, already stiff with salt. The world tilts beneath you as you ascend, the deck shrinking below. The wind whistles around your ears, filling the heavy sails that stretch out like pale wings. You haul and pull, your muscles straining, the ropes biting into your palms. The smell of tar and pitch clings to everything, mingling with the sharp tang of the sea spray that stings your face. Below, men scrub the deck with sandstone and seawater, bent low on their knees as they scour the planks to a dull polish. The sound of brushes rasping in unison becomes a kind of rhythm, a quiet percussion that accompanies every day. The boatswain's whistle calls again, and a new task begins. Perhaps a sail has torn in the night and must be mended. Perhaps barrels in the hold need to be shifted. The work never truly ends, only shifts from one duty to the next. Even when the sea is calm, the ship itself groans and moans like a living creature, its timbers flexing with every wave. As you labor, the air grows hotter below decks. The only light comes from oil lanterns that sputter and flicker, casting a soft glow on the rough beams overhead. Men move shoulder to shoulder through the narrow passageways, carrying buckets of seawater or coils of rope. Conversation is sparse. The ship is too loud for quiet talk to carry far. The wind, the waves, the snap of sails, and the constant call of officers fill every moment. Punishment hangs heavy over the crew like a shadow. The threat of flogging is ever present, a grim reminder of discipline at sea. You've seen it before. A man lashed to the grating, the whip biting into his back, while the rest of the crew watches in silence. It is a brutal but accepted part of life here, meant not just to punish, but to remind. Even in calm weather, fear lingers like a chill in the air. Night comes not with stillness, but with another change of duty. The sun sinks, and lanterns are lit, their glow soft and golden against the darkness. Hammocks are slung once more, men crawling into their narrow cocoons of canvas. The scent of sweat and salt is stronger now, filling every breath, but exhaustion is stronger still. You lie in your hammock, rocking gently as the sea hums against the hull. And for a brief moment, you forget the discomfort, the hunger, and the fear. The ship rocks steadily, and you drift, just as so many sailors did centuries ago, lulled by the same creaks and whispers of the sea. Let us now leave the damp, crowded lower decks behind for a moment, and step softly through time, into the world of one of Britain's most legendary naval figures. The name Horatio Nelson is etched deeply into history. Yet, when we strip away the layers of glory and myth, we find a man who was small in stature, frail in health, and yet utterly determined. A man who, in his own quiet way, shaped the course of empires. Imagine a young boy born in 1758 in a quiet Norfolk village in England. The son of a parish priest, Horatio grew up surrounded by fields and winding country lanes, far from the roar of cannons or the creak of ships' timbers. He was a delicate child, prone to illness, with a body that seemed unsuited to the hardships of a sailor's life. But there was something in him ambition, a spark that drew him toward the sea. At just 12 years old, Nelson joined the Royal Navy as a midshipman. Picture him boarding his first ship, the Reasonable, its towering masts casting long shadows over the bustling dock. He was small for his age, and his uniform likely hung loose on his narrow frame, but he stepped aboard with quiet resolve. Life as a midshipman was far from glamorous. He scrubbed decks, studied navigation, and endured the same harsh conditions as other young sailors. Yet Nilsson's intelligence and discipline stood out, and he advanced quickly through the ranks. As the years passed, he sailed across the world, visiting ports in the West Indies, India, and the Mediterranean. He endured storms that shattered masts, battles that filled the air with smoke and fire, and long months of monotonous waiting at sea. His health, always fragile, suffered. He battled malaria, fevers, and seasickness. But Nelson's reputation as a skilled officer grew steadily, as did his daring. In 1794, during a fierce skirmish off Corsica, Nilsson was struck by a flying piece of iron that blinded him in one eye. Years later, in 1797, he lost his right arm in battle. Amputated on the surgeon's table without modern anesthetics, while the ship rocked gently in the waves. His body bore the scars of countless voyages, but his spirit remained unbroken. It was this mix of brilliance, audacity, and relentless determination that led him to command Britain's fleet during one of the most decisive naval battles in history, the Battle of Trafalgar, fought in October of 1805. Picture the dawn of that autumn morning. The sky over the southern coast of Spain was pale and streaked with soft clouds. The sea rolled gently beneath a fleet of massive ships, wooden giants, bristling with cannons, their sails furled in the cool morning air. Nelson's flagship, HMS Victory, was a striking sight, a towering vessel of 3 decks, painted in bold bands of yellow and black, her decks lined with over 100 guns. Across the horizon, the combined French and Spanish fleets waited, their ships forming a line like a dark wall upon the water. The outcome of this battle would decide the balance of naval power in Europe for years to come. But if Nelson felt fear, he did not show it. He paced the deck calmly, speaking softly to his officers, his voice steady despite the weight of command. Instead of following traditional tactics, Nelson devised an unorthodox plan. Rather than engaging the enemy fleet head-on in a parallel line, he divided his forces into 2 columns and sailed directly toward them, breaking their formation. This maneuver was bold, even reckless, but it would change the course of history. As the morning wore on, the first cannon boomed, and the battle began. The serenity of the sea was shattered by the thunder of gunfire, the crash of splintering wood, and the shouts of men at their stations. Thick smoke curled across the decks, carried away in wisps by the breeze. Yet, even amid this chaos, Nelson remained composed, his calm presence a source of strength to his crew. On the deck of the Victory, he wore his full admiral's uniform, adorned with medals and decorations, decision that made him an easy target for enemy marksmen. He famously raised a telescope to his blind eye earlier in his career, and joked about not seeing signals he disliked. Now, at Trafalgar, his confidence was no act. He believed firmly in his men, his strategy, and his destiny. The hours passed slowly, filled with smoke and thunder. One by one, enemy ships were surrounded, battered, and captured. Nelson's tactics proved devastatingly effective, and the British fleet gained the upper hand. But victory would come at a heavy price. Around midday, as the Victory closed in on the enemy flagship, Nelson stood near the ship's wheel, directing the battle. A French sharpshooter, perched high in a nearby mast, took aim and fired. The musket ball struck Nelson in the shoulder and passed downward through his body. He collapsed instantly. Officers rushed to his side, carrying him below decks as the roar of cannons continued above. Below, in the dim, lantern-lit surgery, Nelson was laid upon a makeshift bed. The ship's surgeon quickly realized the wound was fatal, but Nelson remained calm. He whispered his concern not for himself, but for the outcome of the battle. For hours, as the fighting raged on, he lay quietly, the sounds of victory reaching him faintly through the floorboards. When news finally came that the British fleet had triumphed, Nelson is said to have murmured, "Thank God, I have done my duty," before slipping away. The battle was a resounding victory for Britain, effectively ending Napoleon's ambitions of invading England. Yet, Nelson's death cast a somber shadow over the triumph. He became a national hero, mourned deeply. His body returned to England in a cask of brandy, to preserve it for burial, grim but necessary reality of the time. Even in death, Nelson's image endured. The frail, scarred admiral who defied illness, injury, and danger to lead his fleet to glory. His statue still towers over London's Trafalgar Square. But if you imagine him not in marble, but in life, you might picture a man smaller than expected, thin and pale, standing firmly upon a rolling deck, his one good eye fixed calmly on the horizon. The sea, as always, was both his ally and his undoing. Now, let us drift from this scene of smoke and battle back to the quiet, restless waters of the open ocean. For every famous victory, there were countless ships that never returned, home vessels swallowed by storms or dashed upon unseen reefs. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore some of these mysteries, shipwrecks scattered across the seafloor, and the stories they still whisper centuries later. The open sea has always been a place of beauty and danger, a shifting expanse of blue that has claimed countless ships and countless lives. As we drift now from the noise and chaos of battle, imagine yourself standing at the rail of a ship in the stillness of dawn. The water stretches endlessly in every direction, calm for the moment, but holding secrets far older than the vessel beneath your feet. In the 18th century, long voyages meant isolation. Weeks, even months, could pass without sight of another ship or even a strip of land. Navigation was a delicate art, dependent on the stars, crude maps, and instruments like sextants and compasses. A single miscalculation, a sudden storm, a reef that lay just beneath the surface, or a current that pulled a ship off course could doom an entire crew. Picture a sudden squall sweeping in from the horizon. The sky darkens with little warning. The wind rises and waves grow high, tossing a ship like driftwood. In an age before modern engines or weather forecasting, sailors had only their skill and instinct to rely upon. The masts groaned, sails strained, and men clung to ropes slick with salt spray. Some storms lasted for hours, others for days, and many ships were never seen again once the clouds closed in around them. The seafloor, even now, is littered with the remains of these lost journeys. Some wrecks rest just beneath shallow waters, their broken hulls visible to divers, while others sleep in the black silence of the ocean's depths. And yet, even in their ruin, these ships tell stories. Archaeologists and historians carefully study the fragments they find, piecing together the lives of those who vanished centuries ago. Consider the wreck of the HMS Wager, a British warship lost in 1741. She was part of a squadron sent to attack Spanish holdings during the War of Jenkins' Ear. But her journey ended in disaster, blown far off course by storms. The Wager struck rocks off the treacherous coast of Patagonia in the far south of South America. The ship was smashed beyond repair, and the crew found themselves stranded in one of the most remote, unforgiving landscapes on Earth. The survivors endured bitter cold, starvation, and internal strife. Mutiny broke out as men argued over leadership and survival. Eventually, a handful managed to escape in makeshift boats, but many were lost along the way. Pieces of cannon and wooden planks worn smooth by the ocean. These small details bring the past quietly to life, a reminder of the peril faced by every sailor. Another wreck, the HMS Victory, not Nelson's ship of Trafalgar fame, but an earlier vessel bearing the same name, went down in 1744 during a violent storm in the English Channel. For centuries, her location was a mystery. Some whisper that she had been swallowed whole by the deep. When divers finally found her remains in 2008, they discovered her cannons resting silently on the seafloor, covered in coral and marine life. In her hold, they suspected treasures lay undisturbed for over 2.5 centuries, though no gold or silver was as valuable as the knowledge she offered about naval engineering and trade in her time. The ocean preserves some wrecks like time capsules. In the cold waters of the Baltic Sea, for instance, ships from the 17th and 18th centuries lie perfectly preserved, their wooden hulls intact, their cargoes untouched. In these dark depths, where sunlight cannot reach, the water is still and silent, cradling history in its icy grasp. As you imagine these ghostly ships resting on the seabed, picture their details. Cannons still pointed outward, as if ready to fire. Ropes now hardened into strange shapes. Glass bottles lying unbroken. Shoes and tools, once used daily, now part of a quiet underwater museum. Some divers describe descending into these wrecks as stepping back in time. The ocean has swallowed the chaos of battle and storm, leaving only stillness, as if the ships are waiting patiently to tell their stories. Many of these wrecks remain undiscovered, their names forgotten, their stories lost to time. In the 18th century, communication was slow, and ships often sailed without leaving a clear trail. Families might wait months or even years for news, only to finally accept that their loved ones were gone, claimed by the sea. There is something deeply haunting about this uncertainty, the knowledge that beneath the waves, entire voyages, entire lives are preserved in darkness. Archaeologists use advanced technology now, sonar mapping, remotely operated submersibles, and 3D scanning to explore these sites. But no matter how sophisticated the tools, the sense of awe remains. Each artifact they bring to the surface carries with it a whisper of the past, a pewter plate once used for meager meals, a shoe worn thin by a sailor's steps, a piece of carved wood from a captain's cabin. These simple objects speak volumes, evoking the daily rhythms of life at sea. The ocean itself seems almost protective of these stories, revealing them slowly, one detail at a time. And as we reflect on these wrecks, there is a certain peace in knowing that much of history remains beyond our reach, gently hidden beneath the waves. From the cold, silent depths, let us rise again to the deck of a ship. We've spent time among sailors in their hammocks and voyaged with Nelson into battle. We've explored mysteries buried beneath the ocean. Now, we step into a very different world, a world just a few feet above the sailors' cramped quarters, but separated by a chasm of privilege and power. In our final segment, we'll visit the officers' domain. Candlelit cabins, private meals, and a life of comfort that stood in stark contrast to the misery below, while the lower decks were crowded, dim, and noisy. Life for the officers unfolded in a world apart just a few steps above, yet separated by rank and custom as surely as if by an ocean. Imagine leaving behind the sour smell of damp hammocks and entering a cabin lit by soft lantern light. The air scented faintly of beeswax and wood polish. Here, voices were low and measured, the atmosphere calm, the pace of life unhurried. An officer's cabin, though small by modern standards, felt almost luxurious to those who knew life below. Polished wooden walls, brass fittings, and narrow windows offered a sense of privacy and status. The captain's quarters were the most spacious, often containing a desk, shelves lined with navigational charts, and a proper bed instead of a swinging hammock. Even the smallest details signaled authority. An ornate spyglass resting on a shelf, a finely carved chair secured to the floor, and a small carpet softening the creak of the boards. Meals, too, reflected this division of class and comfort. Officers dined together in the wardroom, a communal space reserved for the ship's gentlemen. Picture a table set with pewter plates and polished silverware, candles flickering gently as the ship swayed on calm waters. A steward might serve roast meats, salted fish, soft bread, and cheese alongside wine or rum. Contrast this with the sailor's fare of hardtack biscuits and thin gruel, eaten crouched in darkness. Even at sea, hierarchy was not only seen but tasted. Etiquette governed every meal. To dine among officers was to participate in a ritual of rank and decorum. Each man had his place, determined by seniority. Toasts were offered to the king and to victories yet to come, and conversation was restrained, often revolving around naval strategy, reports of distant colonies, or the politics of promotion. For many, this wardroom was a sanctuary, a reminder of the society they left behind on shore, a little world of civility afloat in a harsh and unpredictable environment. At night, after the wardroom emptied and the lamps were dimmed, the officers' cabins became places of quiet study. The captain, or a senior lieutenant, might pore over charts, plotting the next day's course by lantern light. Outside, The wind moaned through the rigging, but inside these quarters, time seemed to slow. The creak of timbers and the distant rush of waves provided a steady rhythm, a lullaby of the sea. Officers also enjoyed small privileges that separated them further from the common sailor: personal servants to clean their uniforms, better quality hammocks or mattresses, and access to the captain's library, which might include volumes on navigation, mathematics, and classical literature. These comforts reinforced a rigid hierarchy. Sailors saw their officers as distant figures, clothed in fine coats of deep blue or scarlet, adorned with gold buttons and epaulets. Orders were given crisply, often without explanation, and obedience was expected without hesitation. Yet, life above decks was not entirely free from hardship. The sea spared no man, no matter his rank. In a storm, an officer's cabin was as cold and wet as any other space aboard. The constant danger of disease and injury haunted the ship from top to bottom, and officers bore the heavy burden of responsibility. A wrong decision could send a vessel to its doom. Still, their relative comfort, their ability to dine with dignity, to write letters by candlelight, and to enjoy privacy made their lives vastly different from the men they commanded. Imagine one of these dinners at anchor. The ship lies calm in a sheltered bay, lanterns swaying gently overhead. The sound of water lapping against the hull filters through the open stern windows. Officers in powdered wigs and neatly pressed coats gather around a gleaming table. Outside, the sailors finish their meager rations in near darkness, laughter and song rising from the lower decks. The divide between these worlds was sharp and unmistakable, a reminder of how rigidly class-shaped every aspect of 18th century naval life. As the night deepens, picture the last candle being snuffed out in the captain's cabin. The sea stretches endlessly in the moonlight, the ship rocking softly as if cradled by the water itself. For all its dangers and discomforts, there was a strange tranquility in this life. The groan of the timbers and the whisper of wind through the sails formed a steady rhythm of music that lulled men to sleep even as it carried them across oceans. This is where our journey begins to draw to a close. We've explored the grim routines of sailors, followed the daring career of Admiral Nelson, wandered through the mysteries of shipwrecks, and finally glimpsed the world of naval officers. Together, these stories form a portrait of 18th century seafaring, a life of extremes where danger and discipline coexisted with quiet moments of beauty, and where men of all ranks surrendered themselves to the power of the sea. Now, as you drift back from these candlelit cabins and storm-lashed decks, allow the rhythm of the waves and the hush of history to carry you toward rest. The past is quiet now, its voices faded to whispers, and the sea that once roared beneath these ships has become a soft lullaby. Let your mind float there, suspended between centuries, gently rocking as the world fades into sleep.